Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Within the Music, Discover the Colors of Music concert. You're probably joining us via one of two live streams we have going right now. We have the Baylor University School of Music page live stream, and we have the YouTube live stream. If you would like to ask questions or share your thoughts about what we're doing here on stage, please join us via the YouTube live stream, as we have the chat option open for you to make comments. The link for the live stream via YouTube is right here available for you on the screen. So please take a moment if you need to change streams. Join us via YouTube if you would like to participate in the discussion. Now, the piece you have just heard us perform is the first movement from Bernhard Crusell, Third Clarinet Quartet, Opus 7. Now, when you expect to hear a quartet, quite often you expect to hear a string quartet. In a string quartet, you will have two violin, a viola, and a cello. However, here we have a clarinet quartet. We have a violin, viola, and cello, all members of the string instrument. And then we have an oddball, the clarinet, which is a woodwind instrument joining. Now, it makes you wonder, is this a traditional quartet where the clarinet is just filling in or replacing one of the violin parts? Or maybe this is actually a string trio with a guest, with a soloist, the clarinet. What do you think this was? Was it a string quartet plus a soloist, or maybe a string quartet with a modified instrumentation? Now, I'm curious, Philip, you've played in many string quartets, and you've played now in a clarinet quartet. How is this experience any different from what you usually do in a string quartet, if any?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, there's an obvious continuity of sound when you have a string quartet where you have instruments of the same family playing together. So when we're performing with another instrument, we would take into account effects that we could change or manipulate parts of our technique. For example, the left hand changing our vibrato. If there was an instrument that wouldn't normally use vibrato, or in the case of the bow, we would adapt how we draw the bow to produce a sound and hopefully matching more the natural properties of the instrument that we're playing with.
So you pointed out the idea of vibrato, and clarinet quite often does not use the vibrato. However, string instruments use vibrato a lot in their playing. So as you explained, you have to modify some of the things, the way you produce sound on your instrument to complement the sound of the clarinet and make this ensemble work together as a new different ensemble. Interesting. Well, I'm going to challenge now my colleagues here on stage. I'm going to throw a curveball at them. And I'm going to invite Masha to come and join us on stage. And I'm going to ask them to perform for us Bernhard Crusell Flute Quartet, Opus 8. So I'm curious, again, Philip said they have to change the way they play in order to accommodate for the clarinet sound. So now I'm curious how well they might have to change the way they are playing to accommodate for the flute sound. Let's hear that. They're going to play us just the exposition of the first movement of Bernhard Crusell, first movement. Wow, this piece sounds awfully familiar. I don't know if people at home notice, but this is the exactly same piece as Opus 7. So I guess the Clarinet Quartet was such a smashing hit that Crusell was trying to make extra money by rearranging this to a flute quartet version. I'm sure he's enjoying all the royalties by now. So it's the same piece, but different instrumentation. And as a result, it actually sounds different. Again, it's the same notes, but it sounds different. The mood that we're setting here feels a bit different to me. Kathy, I'm curious if you can elaborate a little bit about what is different from you from playing with the clarinet and playing with the flute in this ensemble, and how you modify your playing.
I think one of the main things that I find different is just between the timbre of the clarinet and the timbre of the flute is that when the flute's in the low register, I have to make my sound less dense by changing my bow speed and weight, just so that we can blend better.
Interesting. So you talked about the flute sound being different. Maybe it's a bit lighter. You said the word less dense, which I liked a lot. And you modified your sound production to match what Masha is doing. And as a result, the whole sonority of the whole ensemble as a whole changed to match what Masha was doing. And I must say, for the listeners at home, you know, the flute version sounded a bit lighter, I agree. Maybe a bit fluffier, happier. And the clarinet version was maybe a bit more serious. I don't know. Maybe it's our personalities as well coming across. I'm not sure. Now, we talked about changing the mood, changing the character of the piece, and you said about modifying your sound. And quite often, we talk about sound in terms of colors. You know, we talk about colors. I'm wearing a blue shirt. Philip is wearing a red shirt. Kathy is wearing a black shirt. And we all can see what it is. But when we bring the terms of colors to sound, it's not as clear. You know, we can talk about sound being dark or bright, dense or light, round and harsh, maybe. And all those things will make a lot of sense when we look at them visually. However, when we talk about it in the term of sound, it's not so cut clear what we mean. It might mean one thing to me, and it might mean totally something different to another listener. Now, I'm curious. There is a very interesting medical condition called synesthesia. And the condition is that a person experience an auditory experience via different cognitive pathways. So, for example, if you hear something, some people say they can see colors when they listen to music. That's the most common example of that. So you kind of like change the way you perceive of music. And when we talk about colors, that's us borrowing that idea of synesthesia to talk about music in colors. But it can be a bit confusing, I must say. I wonder, is anyone here have a different way of approaching talking about sound rather than colors? Yes?
So I forever could not understand this concept of colors in playing. I had this book for tone development for the flute where the composer asked for one melody to be played with a purple color and another melody to be played with a yellow color, and I spent years trying to read his description, trying to understand it and get some different sounds out of my instrument. Many years later, during just a brainstorming session in the practice room, I was looking at a curtain in the window and realized that for me, thinking about texture of sound, the same way we think about it in fabric, how it feels and how it looks, just made more sense to me. So then I started trying to get a velvet sound out of my instrument, a silk, a lace, a linen, just trying to find as many different textures as I could to my color palette on the instrument, which I felt like that's now how I hear sound. So I think everyone's very individual in that sense.
Yeah, Masha, and I like the idea of using texture, because texture, you can see it, but maybe you can feel it as well. So we're using two sensory terms to describe sound. Now, I want you to try to close your eyes. We're going to play for you an excerpt from the Crusell flute quartet version and then from the clarinet quartet version. And I want you to close your eyes and see if you can see different colors, different texture. What color, what texture might be the flute version? And then we're going to play the clarinet version. And I wonder if you might hear a different color, a different texture, or maybe it sounds the same for you. Please share your thoughts in the chat. Does this approach make sense to you now? This piece is exactly the same notes, the same music. However, the mood, the character, the colors, the texture we just created are different. And the whole ensemble changed their sound, their color, their textures according to the instrument we just changed. Now, I want to invite you, and for the rest of the concert, to take this approach of listening to the music. You know, yeah, enjoy the music, don't get me wrong. But I wonder if you can just let yourself a moment to see if you can see the color, see the texture, see them all changing and developing as the piece progresses. Take that new approach and see how you enjoy the music. I'm really curious to ask some of my string players colleagues here on stage if there are any interesting sound production techniques that you use to create different sounds, different textures, shapes of sound on your instrument. Anyone? Kathy?
In this next piece, we have a number of double stops here and there. Essentially, you can play 2 or more strings at one time with a stringed instrument. And should I play an example?
Yes.
All right. Here's the melody. And now I can accompany myself with some additional notes at the same time.
Okay. Interesting. So, Kathy, you're playing 2 strings at the same time, and the sound of the viola sounds much richer to me. Much, kind of, you said you're accompanying yourself. You, one-woman show. You don't need the rest of the band here. Interesting. Excellent. So that's what we call double stop. Excellent. Great. Philip, do you want to share one of your techniques?
Another technique that we have is actually plucking the string, or we call it pizzicato. And of course, without the bow, other instruments that people are familiar with, most famously the guitar, is exclusively plucking the instrument. And the sound is much more immediate. And if we have a case, as in this piece, where we have to play multiple notes or a chord at one time, we have the choice of either strumming it or actually plucking all the notes simultaneously. And so one example, the first I'll do strummed, you'll feel how the beat is more round. And in the second example, where it's all played simultaneously, the rhythm is really the highlight of the feature.
Okay, let's hear that. Interesting. So it's kind of like the difference between like playing a guitar maybe, and then a harp, maybe together all the notes. Interesting. Wow, very good. So in the next piece, I'm going to ask my colleagues to play for you. It's the first movement, the Marcia, from Serenade in C for string trio by the Hungarian composer Ernő Dohnányi. Now, Ernő Dohnányi was very interested in folk music, and he was very interested in Hungarian folk music. So he's going to use all those interesting sound production techniques to make more of a rustic, folklore, dance-like texture. And I want you to listen to this piece. It's pretty short, and see how the different texture change throughout the piece, and how Dohnányi plays with the different pizzicato, different double stop, different sounds that the string instrument create to create new mood, new character, new sounds, new colors, new textures. I'm going to get out of the way. Please please enjoy the first movement, the Marcia, from Ernő Dohnányi's Serenade for String Trio in C. What an exciting piece. Terrific. Thank you, guys. Due to the university's COVID-19 health safety procedures, we have to leave the stage now and let it air out. We're going to come back and perform for you live the final piece on the program, The Life of Birds by Mason Bates. But in the meantime, we pre-recorded a video for you with our presentation of the next piece. So it's going to be just going on continuously. And after the video, we'll resume here live on stage and play for you the piece by Mason Bates, Life of Birds. Please stay tuned after the performance to a quick Q&A session where we'd love to hear some of your thoughts and impression about the concert, or if you have any questions for us. So please stay tuned to the video, and we'll see you after the video for our live performance. The next piece on the program we're going to play for you tonight is The Life of Birds by the Grammy Award-winning American composer Mason Bates, who is based in the Bay Area. Some of you heard Mason Bates' music outside the concert hall, as he is a well-known DJ who makes electronic dance music. When composing classical music, Mason Bates is bridging the electronic sounds and the symphonic sounds.
I do think that the sounds of the digital age have a place in the orchestra. Through my work as a DJ, I've become fascinated by the possibilities of electronic sounds as a kind of a new section. And this provides a huge imaginative landscape. The orchestra is the world's greatest synthesizer. You can still produce unbelievably new sounds with this consort of very old instruments. You wouldn't think there's anything similar between DJing in a club and writing music for an orchestra. But DJing has taught me something very important. Whenever you have two things, like two records, you really have three things. You have your two records and you have the space between them.
In the piece we're playing for you tonight, there are actually no electronics per se. However, those acoustic instruments we have here on stage will create somewhat of electronic sounds ourselves. Now, this is a very interesting combination of instruments, and we're going to have very interesting combinations of sounds. So as Mason Bates said in the video, when he's mixing different records in his DJ activity, that's the same thing he'd be doing here with our instruments and mixing different timbres, different sounds, different textures to create new, cool sounds and blends. Now, as the title of the piece suggests, The Life of Birds, this piece is a compilation of miniatures featuring birds. For many centuries, classical music composers were obsessed with capturing the sound of nature, and especially the sound of bird calls, and bringing them into the concert hall. A prime example that comes to mind is Beethoven. In his Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony, has the famous bird calls at the end of the second movement. The flute playing the nightingale call, the oboe playing the quail, and the clarinet, of course, playing the cuckoo. Now, Mason Bates tackles this task of capturing bird sounds with a very unusual, interesting ensemble. We have a quartet here on stage, but it's not a traditional quartet. We have two string instruments, we have a violin and a cello, and we have two woodwind instruments, the flute and the clarinet. Now, as we discussed earlier this concert, there are so many possibilities of pairing and creating new sounds together with this ensemble. And that's something that Mason Bates take to full advantage in this piece, trying to create new sounds, new textures, new shapes of sound that will portray the sounds of birds in this piece. This piece is in 6 short movements. The first movement in this piece, titled Moving Parts, and it's full with flurry of activity and different rhythmical patterns in all 4 voices. And it sounds like this. So you can see there's a lot of activity in all the 4 lines. And to me that sounds a bit like creating sound loops on a mixing board of a DJ. You know, they have all the different patterns and they mix it together and creates all those different layers of sounds to create this new interesting texture, very cool groovy pattern that you want to dance to. So let's break it down. Let's see what we have here. Let's start with Patricia. Let's hear your violin line. Very energetic, very rhythmic line. I'm going to go next, and let's hear what the clarinet line has. So as you might notice, the rhythmic patterns are pretty similar between the violin line and the clarinet line. And there'll be moments that we actually replay together and moments that we play our own individual lines. And that's something that Mason Bates is going to play with, the idea of the sounds playing together and not playing together, and see how the motive transform and change mid-phrase with all those new colors and possibilities. Let's hear both playing together. So you can really hear there are times that we have a special connection of sound with the violin and the clarinet, and there are times that we just play our own little line, and the sound changes. Very interesting. Now, Philip, what do you have in those exact measures? Let's hear what you have. Very different pattern, very different motives. Very groovy. I like this. Very good. So let's see what happens when we add all those three layers. We have the violin layer, the clarinet layer, which are somewhat similar, and added with the cello layer, which is very different. Let's see how that layering works. Okay, you see what I'm talking about? The different layers all coming together like in a mixing board? Yeah. So now, Masha, what do you have there in the flute? It seems like it's very full of notes. How does that sound? Very flourishy, very active sound. Now, I'm curious to see how when we all play together, how it's all going to come to a mix. Let's hear that one more time. So when we perform for you this first movement, I encourage you guys to listen and see, do you hear 4 different lines, 4 different instruments playing their motives? Or maybe after a while it all blurs up and all those sounds and motives and textures come together to create a new mix of sounds like you mix in a DJ board. The second movement is titled Parakeet Daydream. And this one features a somewhat lazy melody in the low register of the violin. Then later on it's passed to the low register of the clarinet, and then later on to the low register of the flute, and then back to the clarinet. Patricia, can you play us the theme of the second movement, please? Beautiful. So when you listen to this movement, I want you guys to really tune into that melody and see if you can follow through the different parts of the movement and see how it transforms and changes and shifts around with the different instruments playing it, the different colors, different textures. Now, I must admit, I never heard or seen a parakeet before. And when I came across this piece, this movement, I decided to do my research and look up what a parakeet might look like or sound like. It's a really beautiful, colorful little bird that its chirping and singing is so melodious and beautiful singing qualities. And it sounds so interesting. Let's listen to a quick excerpt of that little bird sound. In this piece, Mason Bates have all those parakeet-like sounds coming in and out from the piece to accompany that beautiful lazy melody. Masha, can you play for us your favorite parakeet little sound effect? So once again, Mason Bates has tried to capture that beautiful singing quality of the parakeet right there in the flute. How about Patricia and Philip? What do you guys have? Beautiful, so very rhythmical, very nice, beautiful sounds. In the third movement, titled The Caged Bird Sings, this is the heart of the piece. And in this movement, the strings play together a long, beautiful line full of longing, a true bird song, while being trapped in a cage of minimalist figurations that is played by the winds. Now, in this movement, Mason Bates does an amazing job of setting the ensemble in 2 sets of pairs. We have the string players as the one pair of sounds, and then we have the wind players and another set of sounds. And by making those ensembles play together, Mason Bates creates a new sonority, a new mixture of sound, maybe even create a 5th and a 6th instrument for this ensemble. So when the flute and the clarinet play the little cage figuration together, if they do a good job, and I'm sure we're going to do a good job, they create a new sound of an instrument that doesn't exist. Maybe we can call it a clarinet. A flute and a clarinet together, a clarinet. So we're going to play for you now the little excerpt, and I want you guys to close your eyes and see if you can hear a flute and a clarinet playing together, or maybe a totally new instrument, a clarinet. Pretty interesting color of the instrument combined together. Now, the strings, where they have the beautiful singing melody of the bird. And let's hear it. How you guys play together as one instrument. Beautiful, eerie, serene texture. Beautiful. Philip, I'm curious. It doesn't really sound like cello to me. You're doing something special with your sound. What are you doing there to blend so nicely with Patricia's violin sound?
Well, this special technique is called an artificial harmonic. We have, generally when we play, we depress the string fully with our left hand. If we lightly touch with our finger at fractional divisions of the string, so for example, if I cut the string in half and lightly touch, I'll create what we call a harmonic. Now, if I choose to pick a pitch which is outside the natural harmonic series on a string, I have to, in effect, shorten the string length with a finger, in this case the thumb, and then I place another finger on top of that, a fourth above that, another fraction, and then we can get a different pitch that I can now manipulate.
Wow, really cool sound, beautiful. So I guess in this little melody, although Patricia is playing up in the higher tessitura of her instrument, Philip on the cello, which is expected to play lower, finds a way to manipulate its sound, the color that you produce, to fit into that tessitura. Beautiful. Can I ask us to play it one more time, and I invite our audience to listen to this melody being played. And I want you guys to really try to pinpoint. Can you guys identify which part of the mix of the sound is the violin sound? Which part of the mix of the sound is the harmonic cello sound? In the middle section of the third movement, which is, in my opinion, one of my favorite moments in the whole piece, Mason Bates instructs us to play non-vibrato and invites us all to create one unified sound of all four voices. For the first time, we come together to play together as four voices. And that creates an amazing blend of sound, which in my eyes, I kind of feel like it's kind of like a kaleidoscope of sounds. And in that moment, every few moments, one instrument sticks out from that texture and changes the color of the kaleidoscope, as if you're turning it around and get different pattern in the kaleidoscope itself. And it's really a beautiful moment. It feels like time stands still, and it's very eerie and mystery. Maybe you feel like you're on a very trippy moment, but just the sounds and the colors are so beautiful and so expressive. The fourth movement, titled On a Wire, Mating Dance, features a mating dance on the tiptoes where the two woodwinds persist on singing their love song despite the lopsided accompaniment. Now, in this movement, Mason Bates pays an homage to the great American tradition of jazz playing. And this is a great opportunity for us to alter our sound and our quality produced from our instrument to produce a more jazzy appropriate sound. So for example, the violin will turn to be a fiddle. Patricia, let's hear the fiddle. Very different from the violin she had a moment ago. She had to replace those instruments, right? She has a fiddle in behind her. Great. And the cello and the clarinet and the flute will all play much more jazzy flavored sounds and textures. Let's hear that. Much wilder sound than you expected. Now, the fifth movement is titled Old World Flycatcher. Now, I didn't know what a flycatcher was, but a flycatcher is a small, agile bird that is going to be portrayed by the clarinet. And in this piece, it's on a hunt to catch the skittish insectoid that is going to be portrayed in the motives played by the flute and the violin. Let's hear that insectoid. And the clarinet is going to be playing the flycatcher. And I have a special instruction from Mason Bates. He wants me to play a large yet nimble creature. I'm not sure what does it really mean on the clarinet sound, but I'll try to see if I can capture that. Now, in this movement, once again, we're going to have that techno music style of layering effects and different sounds coming together, different rhythmic patterns to create this really groovy dance feeling. Now, the sixth movement is actually an attacca, and all the building of the dance builds up in the fifth movement, and then we somehow find ourselves back coming to a full circle to the moving parts movement, the first movement, but now it's the sixth and final movement that bring us all together to home. We're going to perform for you now live, The Life of Birds by Mason Bates. I invite you to take this new approach of listening to music. Listen to the colors, the textures, the shapes of sound, and see how this experience of this piece might be a bit different for you. Please stay tuned for our short Q&A session following our live performance. Please enjoy Mason Bates' The Life of Birds. Once again, thank you all for joining us. A few thank yous before we move on for the Q&A session. First of all, I need to thank the Houston Arts Alliance for their support for this project that's been going on for a while. I would like to thank all my amazing colleagues who joined me for this concert. Patricia, Philip, Kathy, please join us on stage, Kathy, Masha. I would like to thank Stephen Bullock for streaming and for Rick for helping up there. I'd like to thank Anna, Jean Grady, Mary, Jill, and whoever else I forgot for all your help with this concert, putting it together and make it nice and smooth. This is a unique situation we're performing right now without an audience, and we were trying to feel your energy and imagine you're cheering and asking questions and looking all confused and happy and intrigued by our concert today. But would love to hear from you. I'm going to have Anna here read some of your comments or questions, so please, we would love to hear from you now. Not everybody at oh, sorry, we're not ready for that. I apologize. Starting, oh, I guess we have the QR code. Yes.
Larry asked, what are the things at the bottom of the flute and clarinet? Are they homemade?
Excellent. Very good. So those are unusual times we are with the pandemic. And flute and clarinet produce sound by blowing air. And we're trying to keep everybody here on stage and in the audience safer. And the research shows that if we put a sock or a sort what's the official term for this? Stocking at the end of the bell, that prevents some of the aerosols going into the air. So yes, it is homemade. It's a stocking that I borrowed from Masha. I don't think she will want it back.
Max asked, what is your favorite tone color in the piece?
What's my favorite?
Tone color in the
Tone color in the piece. You know what? Let's start. Patricia, do you want to share some of? Let's go around and have everybody share that moment. Or if you need more time to think. Here, Masha, you want to start?
I love the moment that Ron discussed in the video where the flute and clarinet keep alternating lines, and if done as well as possible, if you close your eyes, you stop being able to hear what instrument it is. Unfortunately, while playing it, you're just very focused on playing it. But that's my favorite kind of mixing of colors within the piece.
I'll say for my moment, as I shared in the video, is the middle section of the third movement, where all of us, and Patricia's agreeing. Okay, so that's Patricia's favorite moment, and I'll come with a different moment. But I feel that's the moment where all the sounds come together, and we talk about the kaleidoscope and the shift. And it's one of the things that in the room, like when we play here on stage, we kind of try to anticipate how it sounds. But it was really cool when I listened back to our dress rehearsal from last weekend, and I listened to it, and it's like, wow, it actually sounds like this. Like all the sounds coming and mixing. It was really, really cool. Another cool moment that I find, I really like the jazzy movement. It just feels fun. And it kind of has a nice little groove to it. Philip? It's Philip's too. Yeah. I hope that answered Max's question.
Do you think the piano trade-offs polyphony on the same instrument for range of colors?
The piano, can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Do you think piano trade-offs polyphony on the same instrument for range of colors?
That's interesting. So I feel for piano players, and I'm not a piano player, I'll say that's the hardest thing to do because you have one instrument and you have to do all about the voicing yourself. And for me, I can barely keep my mind on just playing the clarinet part and try to change. But then to think you have to voice with your fingers and each one of them have their own individual line seems to me such a challenging thing. But the greatest pianists do it better than I will imagine, and I inspire to do it as good as they do. I don't know if anyone want to share their thoughts about that. Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about your experience playing concerts during the pandemic? How do you cope? Are there any surprising advantages?
Yes. So just a small disclosure. This is my first concert since March of last year. Not last year, this year, but March. And it feels like last year. Wow, 2020. And then when we first got together just to rehearse, and there was a bit delays of everything, I was just like, wow, playing with people. I forgot how nice it is. And yes, the concert is nice, don't get me wrong. But just the act of being able to get together with friends and make music was amazing. For us as performers, it's a bit disengaging to play for an empty hall. We all know you are at home watching, but we so much feed of the energy of our audience. So when you ask the people here in the hall, shall we clap? And it's like, I don't know if two people clapping, it feels like a bit like pity clapping. So we like to imagine the audience enjoys that. Yes?
You also forgot to mention, Ron did do outdoor porch concerts throughout the spring, right when the pandemic hit. We were living in Houston. He was playing on the balcony for all the neighbors, which was quite popular. But it's also very strange. We're so used to playing inside halls and getting the sound of the hall. We kind of crave that, and to play outside, especially as a wind player, and your tone just disappears immediately. And then you would hear, applause from a block away in either which direction.
I'll say that the most challenging thing was to make sure that I fit into my concert black pants. I haven't worn them for such a long while, and I was just like, are they gonna fit? So that was nice as well. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Phil, if you want to talk.
I'll just say from my own personal experience during this last year that one of the perhaps silver linings of this is that it's given us opportunities to be more innovative in how we're communicating with people, and I think we all have to take a little bit more ownership of where we're sharing our music with a larger audience and being online largely. And I think, especially working with students here at Baylor, we find there's a newfound appreciation for music live when we do hear it, so we're no longer taking it for granted. And I hope that that's something that we will sustain once things, if they do ever return back to how we're hoping they will.
Next question.
A few people have mentioned in the chat how much chemistry it seems that you have with each other. Does this come naturally, or have you been able to hang out during the pandemic?
Well, the chemistry is because I'm hilarious and I'm funny, so it makes sense. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing colleagues. And disclosure, Masha is my wife. So if we didn't have chemistry, the two of us, that'd be a bit weird. But I must say that my amazing colleagues here on stage are so invested in this project and so committed. And, it's very challenging to put a concert together in this current time. And I'll say that we don't hang out outside because just to be safe and keep everybody safe. But we hang out musically by making music together, which for me is the best kind of hanging out. Anyone want to?
I just would add that another challenge we have is that we have to be spaced apart so much further than we would actually love to be. And I think in order to get around that, we find we have to be extra communicative in our gestures. And I think that's something that I've enjoyed in doing this in such a short amount of time.
The same person said, in other words, how have things been different on a personal level since the pandemic?
Oh, wow. Personal level? Are we, yeah. I'll talk again about, we all love performing, we all love teaching, but we all love performing. And there's something about that when something is taken away from you and you don't know when you can able to do it again, is very hard. It was one thing if we knew, okay, we have to just wait for the next 3 months, and then things are going to go back to normal, and we do it. But we still don't know how much longer we're going to be in this limbo of non-performing. And so there's something about just not knowing. I feel the solution was to take action, to do something about it, and try to put this concert together and try to be as safe as possible. Because just for me at least, just sitting at home and thinking and imagining about how much fun it'll be to play chair music would not do as good as actually playing the chair music. Kathy?
I'll just add that after teaching online all spring, it was such a pleasure to be able to come back and hear students live and to hear students in a beautiful performance space. And of course, we missed that during the springtime, but just to be able to, that moment when I came back and I started hearing students again was just such a special thing. So I think we take a lot of things for granted.
Yes, we definitely do.
In music, what have been some of y'all's favorite colors/textures y'all have encountered?
That's a very broad question. Wow. Anyone want to take the lead on that? Yes.
I absolutely love when different instruments blend and create their own instruments, similar to what Ron was saying, the Clarinet. So there's a couple of moments in symphonic orchestral repertoire that I just absolutely love for those moments. Schubert, the opening of Schubert's 8th Symphony has an amazing clarinet oboe blend that I remember the first time I heard it in a symphony hall, I went, who's playing? What is that? And I absolutely love those woodwind blend moments as a woodwind player.
I'll say that there are so many moments that you kind of have to take a take back, like who's playing, what is this instrument, and that's such an amazing experience. And for me, again, I'll be a bit selfish here. For me, it's the moment when I play with someone and we create that sound. That's like, ooh, that's nice. Like we're creating a cello net or I don't know, viola or whatever it is. But those moments when you just see your sounds coming together and creating a new sound, and it kind of like you want to touch it. It's right there. But those moments for me as a performer, it's something that is very fulfilling. As a listener, there's so many pieces and so many composers who play with different colors and textures. And it was interesting to even listen to Mason Bates' music, which is very non-traditional, and see how his take with electronic music introduced new sets of palettes of colors and textures that we're not so used to hear and play in our regular or traditional repertoire. I don't know if any of the string players have a specific moment they want to share.
I would just add that I often get asked what my favorite pieces are the like, and I find a really hard time ever coming up with an answer because I feel so much of it depends on where I am as a person at that moment. It's much like, what do I want to eat tonight? You know, how do I feel? And there's so many beautiful options out there that really it's just a matter of how I feel today.
And something that I hope that our listeners today can take away from this concert. Again, there's so many ways to listen to music, and music is so enjoyable on so many levels and layers, but there's something about colors that we're so used to just rely on our vision to experience, that when you think about colors as an auditory experience, it's very interesting. And so the idea of just closing your eyes and see how the colors being created in front of you is very charming and very cool effect that I think is something that I hope you guys can take from now on for every concert you attend and listen to from now on.
I really appreciated your program tonight, bringing together more and less familiar composers, older and contemporary. Could you say something about how you chose the repertoire for tonight?
Wow, good question. So usually when I come with my programs, there's a piece that I want to play. You know, I really want to play this piece. It's a good piece. And when you have great colleagues you want to play with, that makes it easier. I'll say the Crusell, it might be not so well known among mainstream classical music composer, but he is a clarinet player and a clarinet composer, so we know his music pretty well. And I always wanted to play his quartet, and I wish I could play the rest of it. Actually, the rest of the piece is actually pretty good as well and enjoyable, so hopefully that's going to happen soon. I felt that Dohnányi was such a cool piece to show all the different textures, and I kind of asked for help with my colleagues here to find a piece that showcased all the different textures and colors. And the Mason Bates, I feel like it's one of those pieces that you cannot just program it by itself and hope that, like, it needs some context, and hopefully it was more enjoyable for you as the audience with that context. So somehow all those pieces kind of complemented each other and came together. I hope it was somewhat smooth transitions, or maybe it was more manipulated and forced by me, but that's the way. Is this it? This is our last question? Yeah, good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was nice to have you virtually there. We hope you enjoyed the concert. I want to thank again my colleagues on stage and everybody who helped with the production today. And please stay tuned for our next concert. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and thank you again.